Hello, welcome to Dev Radio. This is the next part of our Cloud Adoption Framework series. We've got Wayne Meyer here and Mike Rockwell from Megaport. We're going to talk about some information about multi-cloud networking that should be helpful for people who have decided on a multi-cloud strategy and are looking to move forward to the ready stage. So thanks a ton. Mike, Wayne.
Hey, good to see you, Matt. I got to say that the music was a little catchy. So if kind of Bob in there as we came in.
Yeah, it makes it feel more professional than we actually are, doesn't it?
Yeah, I kind of liked it. That was new.
Yeah.
Good job. Cool. So we should let's dive right in. I mean, I think there's a lot of cool stuff to kind of talk through, and we've got this CAP series that we've been running over the last I guess it's almost a year now. Hey, Matt, we started off doing a couple of first party solutions, and we moved into some of the third party, and I think this Megaport solution I think is one that just plugs in and pretty topical. I think most of the customers I speak to on a daily basis are hung up on some of the networking aspects and the BCDR aspects, especially for customers that are just new to Azure. Kind of the first scenario they typically walk through is like, hey, how do I do kind of BCDR and so on. So I think this is very, very topical. If we kind of all remember back to kind of the cloud adoption framework, and the structure that we work within is kind of those three things that we talk to. There's the business side of it, which is all that strategy, planning, motivations, outcomes, really kind of getting locked in on kind of why we're moving to the cloud and thinking about the cloud as a model and the organization structure. There's that whole middle piece, which is about the platform, and that's kind of our landing zone, right? And so as you start to think about your management group structure, your subscription democratization, RBAC, security, networking, all of those things are absolutely critical at that point. And so we've built some reference architectures to help support that. And I think that this solution plugs directly into that space. And then as we get into governance, one of the core elements of our governance, core disciplines of our governance methodology is that resource consistency. And resource consistency is about kind of recovery, discoverability, and so on. And so making sure we kind of got some good governance and guardrails around how do we think about the data flow and traffic flow and so on. So I'm excited to kind of see what Mike has got to kind of show as we go through this. We've kind of seen a quick glimpse, but Mike, I think you're going to be the star of the show today. We'll just kind of hang out and possibly fire some questions at you with things, if there's things that are top of mind. You want to jump right in.
That's awesome. I think you say star of the show. I was like, man, when I heard it was Microsoft Dev Radio at first, before I really dug into it, I thought it was radio, and probably a face for radio. But hopefully, they won't be focusing on the video, and it'll be entranced in the content here. But
buddy, this is why we wear a hat and put glasses on. So.
Well, that's why I work in dim lighting. I think it really brings out my features. But no, it's great to be here with you, Wayne, Matt. It's been a pleasure kind of getting to know you guys through this process, and really impressed with what you're producing here in the channel, the Dev Radio channel here. So really an honor to be here. So first of all, on the Megaport side of it, I'm the global head of solutions on the direct side of the business. So essentially, I manage the solution architects across Europe, North America, and APAC. My background is in sales as a sales engineer and solution architect over the last 20 years, really moving from the telecom world into more of a cloud connectivity world that we're in today. So as we jump into it, just real quick, just to give you an idea of what we do here at Megaport, we're a global network as a service provider. So we believe that customers should be able to really build that private connectivity in the same manner that they're building their cloud resources within Azure or AWS or any other cloud provider. And really that's in a flexible, on-demand, pay-as-you-go type of manner. So, we've built out a network. It goes across 24 countries. So well dispersed across APAC, North America, and EMEA. We're interconnected with 700 data centers now today, which is truly incredible. So one of the unique things is we're also a neutral platform. So when we talk about data center providers, we're in third-party locations such as, the places that most people know, like Equinix, Digital Realty, CyrusOne. But we work across 105 unique data center operators. So some smaller ones, Cavern in Kansas City, for instance, Bresco in Columbus, Ohio, we're in multiple data centers that maybe are more regional. So great opportunities to connect to our network and get to the cloud. So along with connecting the data centers, we also connect to over 230 cloud on-ramps today. So we're talking about Microsoft here, which is awesome. Great ExpressRoute partner here with Megaport. We have 50 locations where we actually connect with ExpressRoute across the globe. And really, when you think about connectivity to the cloud and you're building out your strategy and connecting your data center to the cloud, or you're connecting cloud to cloud, you want to be able to take the best route possible. So working with a provider that has on-ramps that ultimately sit close to your networks, that's going to be to your advantage. And we've got a great footprint for that. The last piece we'll just touch on is we also have a compute platform. So customers have the ability to turn up a virtual router that sits on our private network. We supply the license. They're able to route cloud to cloud, and we're going to go through that a bit here today. We also just launched our Megaport Virtual Edge, or MVE. And what's great about MVE, it takes all the benefits of the infrastructure that we built and being able to build data center to cloud connectivity on demand. But now customers can also deploy virtual network functions on our platform. So specifically right now with some of the larger SD-WAN providers, Cisco, Fortinet, Versa, we'll have SilverPeak, Aruba, and VMware coming online here soon. But now customers can deploy essentially a virtual edge or a virtual router on our platform. It looks like a virtual routing data center essentially anywhere across the globe. They can build out Megaport infrastructure to support their SD-WAN overlays. So, good for modernizing MPLS underlying network connectivity. Also great for setting up private connectivity, from the branch to the cloud. But with that, let's I'll move away from the Megaport story and jump more in here to the content. So the first piece that we'll touch on, and one of our use cases today, or one of the primary things that we're talking about, is disaster recovery. So kind of some of the things that you were talking on, Wayne, as we launched here. One of the things that's interesting at Megaport is we're working with customers is that they've built out this rock solid environment, and they've built out their environments in the cloud. They've also got a great footprint within their network, their private network footprint, but they haven't necessarily thought of all the components in connecting multi-cloud. So if I've got AWS resources, I've got Azure resources, haven't really thought through the process of the best way to connect those resources together, but also building connectivity back into the data center. So if we start to think of some of the ways that we would approach that, internet's probably the most, the quickest and easiest way to set that up. Security issues for sure, but a lot of it also around performance and reliability and control of where your traffic's actually routing. From a performance perspective, customers who try and go that route quickly realize that that's probably not going to be the best option for them. Then there's also traditional methods of working with carriers and stringing up private lines. Well, Megaport's really was a leader or pioneer in the space of kind of revolutionizing network connectivity and allowing customers the ability to put the control back in their hands to build network connectivity like they do their resources in the cloud. So some of the things that we have conversations on when customers come to us and think about building out disaster recovery network architecture, one is, you want to be able to build on demand. So just as you're building those resources in the cloud, you want to be able to build private connectivity between the endpoints that are interesting to you. Typically, that's going to be your data center and the cloud providers. Easy to use. I can't tell you like how often we still get on calls and customers will throw up a Visio diagram. Thing looks like spaghetti. They've got lines pointing everywhere. They're working with multiple carriers. They don't know exactly even where those connections land. So they want an easy to use platform where they can use a management console, like they do in the cloud, or they do with their SD-WAN type of network connectivity, the modern, network architecture. And they also want to be able to do the things that you guys talk about here on Dev Radio, right? They want to use automation. So they want to use code. They want to use API type of automation to integrate this their network infrastructure into their platforms. They have that visibility, and we offer all that. They're typically looking at going multi-cloud. So customers are definitely hesitant to put all of their resources in one location, or even potentially within one cloud. So often customers may not start with a multi-cloud strategy, but they may migrate to that, and they need to understand what is the path to make that happen? Because usually it happens pretty quick. I think you guys probably see that in your conversations. Security, nobody cares about security. I'll just skip that now. I mean, that's always the top of mind. I mean, customers want control, but with that control, they also want that flexibility. So when I talk about control, they want to understand when their data leaves their network, they want to understand that from point A to point B, exactly where it's going. And another reason why the private connectivity model is typically going to be top of mind, because they have full control over the routing of their traffic. And then they want a global operation. Let's face it, in disaster recovery, we want to, be able to build our resources within multiple geographies, maybe within North America, East Coast, West Coast, but also typically, customers that we work with are going to be global or hoping to expand to more of a global operation if they haven't already. So you want to have that future-proof or have that strategy to go global. And then, heck, I mean, what good is a network if it has points of failure and it doesn't work, right? So, high availability, diversity. I think that is, as we start to get into talking about architecture, that is one of the key components. And all these things that that we talk about here, it's really what we like to call future-proofing the network. And what I mean by that is just customers having the tools to make decisions, in real time as they want to adjust or flex their network. Quickly, I'm going to touch on ExpressRoute because this is a Microsoft channel, and Microsoft's one of our largest partners here at Megaport. But if you're not familiar with private connectivity into Azure, ExpressRoute is Microsoft's solution. So really what that looks like, customers, they're going to go into their Azure console, they'll provision ExpressRoute. When they provision their ExpressRoute, they're going to select a peering location. When they select that peering location, ultimately they have the ability to connect physically to two separate routers on the Megaport or on the Microsoft network. So one of the things that is unique to Azure compared to the other cloud providers is when you buy an ExpressRoute, Microsoft automatically gives you the ability to support diversity at the edge of their network. And that means you can support a connection on Microsoft Edge Router 1. You can also terminate a second connection on Microsoft Edge Router number 2. And that gives you the ability to have two BGP peering relationships from your data center to a Microsoft Enterprise Edge router. So typically, in ExpressRoute language, this would be referred to as the primary connection, and this would be referred to as the secondary connections. So two peers at the Microsoft Edge, each of those peers is going to be advertising the same routes from the VNets that are ultimately attached to it within your Azure environment. You can choose as the customer to set this up in an active-active type of relationship, or you could set it up in active passive, but that's totally up to you and how you want to configure the routing across the network. The other thing that's great about Microsoft is when you set up an ExpressRoute and you select the peer location. So if we say this is Chicago here in the United States, where we're actually setting up our ExpressRoute and peering with Microsoft, Azure gives you the ability to add in VNets from multiple regions. Now, I'm not going to get into all the different setups that you can have with the ExpressRoute because that would take probably the whole session. But Microsoft has a lot of flexibility in how you can set up your network. But in the basic sense, it's a hub and spoke type of model where you select your peer and then you can attach your VNets back into that ExpressRoute. So on a standard SKU, which is pretty typical of what customers would choose with their ExpressRoute, they could attach up to 10 VNets back to a single ExpressRoute peer location across one specific geographical region. So again, if we're talking North America, I could attach 10 VNets throughout any region in North America back to the SKU on a standard SKU with ExpressRoute. And again, Microsoft has options to set up global connectivity across their network as well.
Yeah, Mike, and just to add to that, so if you go into kind of our cloud option framework content, within the ready section, we've actually built out a whole area called landing zones and Azure landing zones. In the Azure landing zones is an actual architecture, reference architecture for kind of a variety of different models, like your hub and spoke, VWAN, kind of, using Azure Firewall or something else, third-party MBAs. but we actually got that architecture defined and actually built up through code as well. So I also recommend that for folk that are just kind of getting in and learning, take a look at some of those reference architecture that can help kind of connect some of those dots as well.
Oh, heck yeah. That's awesome that you guys supply that. The other thing that's just, I mean, it's the name of the slide, but the other thing that's great is Microsoft does supply an SLA with ExpressRoute. So if you connect both that primary and secondary connection and then have those both computers active on the routers, Microsoft's going to cover you with that SLA. So, included in the service, which is great.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question. What type of customers are you typically engaging on? What's a typical size customer that you see kind of having these conversations with you?
Oh man, it really does. It's so interesting. You'd think like some of the Fortune, 100, Fortune 500 type of companies, potentially they may be more of in a dedicated type of footprint, but we work with those customers across the board. So it really is small, medium, and large type of customers. And we do work across any vertical, right? I mean, we're providing network connectivity here. So it's not specific to any particular vertical or, I would say market cap. And, within each customer network, there's kind of subsets of networks potentially, right, that are operating pieces of the business. So, they may have a production network that they've built out all on dedicated footprint, especially if it's a financial company for trading, right? They're probably not going off of a layer 2 type of connectivity platform. They're going to have dedicated fiber connections from point to point, and they're going to be on very specific low latent routes, right? So those types of things, probably aren't sitting on our footprint. But to the financial sector, we have a great use case with ICE, which is Intercontinental Exchange, and they're a clearinghouse for the New York Stock Exchange, right? And one of the things that they utilize our network for is basically this configuration right here. What they offer is they have data feeds within each one of the clouds that we see here, AWS, Azure, and GCP. And when customers come to them they want to pull down specific data analytics out of these public cloud environments and connect them back into the ICE network, ICE simply sets up a connection over our platform, a logical connection on that physical connection to the Megaport network, and pulls those feeds down from the clouds to their customers. So, it depends on ultimately the resources that the customers use and how they're going to set it up. But we work across every vertical. We work across every, what I would say, size of business.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good. I mean, because I know that this is a sticking point for a lot of those organizations that may not have kind of deep sets of resources to focus on networking. It can be a highly complex topic. And so whether you're a small business right up through to kind of those large businesses, obviously the large businesses typically have deep set of resources to deal with this work. But those smaller businesses, great to hear that you guys scale kind of down. And I like the easy the easy term up front was really what I wanted to go to for some of those.
Yeah. Work. I think what's interesting is, Megaport's whole premise is like, you don't have to be a CCIE, a Cisco expert or a networking expert to work with Megaport services, right? Like, one of the things that I worried about when I came here at Megaport is like, I don't want to make it sound too simple. I'm like, I'm not even gonna have a job. If they could everybody just figure it out themselves, that's great. But our goal really is for customers to be able to go into our Megaport portal and, ultimately be able to design these services in an easy fashion, right? So even to touch on that here, and we'll go into a quick demo here in a few minutes, but just to touch on some of the architectures that we're building, and really kind of we see two models in the disaster recovery type of conversation, or really even across the board, right? Where customers, they're still going to have their resources they're going to hold in house within the data center. So from a Megaport perspective, as I mentioned in my summary review, we're deployed in third-party data centers across the globe. So customers, typically, they'll go into our portal, they'll provision a 1 gig, a 10 gig, or 100 gig connection to our network in the data center. They'll run a cross connect. Once that cross connect's completed, they have the full breadth of the Megaport network ultimately in their hands. So customers are going to set up an 802.1q trunk. They'll build logical connections. So they'll set a .1q VLAN on each one of these connections that we would term as virtual cross connects. And they're going to build pseudo wire Ethernet private line connections to the cloud provider edge. And really what Megaport is providing here is we are providing that private layer 2 connectivity from A to B. So it's a transparent pipe. We're not routing customers' IPs. We're not accessing their data. We're just simply transparently passing the ones and zeros across the line until it hits the cloud provider network. So with the ExpressRoute, it hit that peer router, and then ultimately it'd route back into the VNet to the VNets within the customer's network. Or potentially, the other great thing about ExpressRoute that I didn't touch on earlier was that you can set up private peering, which goes to the private resources within the VNet, but they can also set up Microsoft peering on that same layer 2 connection to access publicly addressable spaces like object storage, for instance, right? Another great feature of ExpressRoute, with the other cloud providers, if you want to go private and public, you're going to have 2 separate layer 2 connections. But Azure supports the Q&Q type of relationships. That's another advantage. But really where we see this most of the time is where customers have data centers that are typically closer to the regions that they're trying to access in the cloud in this type of scenario, because all that traffic is still coming back in between the cloud provider network and back into the customer's private network. So they are setting up their routing relationships, and they're setting up a BGP peering relationship directly with each one of the cloud providers. So that traffic is all coming back into the cloud, which can be fine for a lot of the customers that we work with. But when you're starting to think about building out a disaster recovery type of scenario, there are many instances where you're backing up your resources directly in another cloud. So you want to have that cloud-to-cloud connectivity, and that's where really going into more of the network as a service or as a service type of platform and having a virtual router expands what you can do. And where we see the virtual router coming into play is that it does avoid now having customers to backhaul all that traffic back in the data center. So if I want to route from Azure to AWS, in the example over here, I have to route back in my data center and route it back into AWS. So I'm tromboning that traffic. I'm bringing it back into my data center. I'm adding extra latency across the path. I'm also having to add additional resources within my data center to ultimately accommodate for that traffic. I can offload those routing decisions. I can turn up a virtual routing instance with Megaport, sits on top of our private network, still never touching the internet. The virtual router the customer manages, it's going to support the layer 2 connections of our network, first of all, right? But it's also going to support those routing relationships. So it'll set up the BGP peering relationship with each one of the endpoints. We'll talk about some of the flexibility of setting up the routing relationships as we go through the MCR demo. But now I can deploy this MCR. Typically, these sit right at the edge of the cloud provider network. So just as an example, if I want to go from Azure, I think it's US East over to AWS. The edge of the cloud provider network in Azure and AWS it's actually where the physical appliance of the MCR sits as well. And we see a very, very low latency profile, typically sub 8 milliseconds between Azure and AWS, or even GCP if they want to go to US East 4, which is their Northern Virginia type of region.
That's cool. And Mike, so all of this is great. You mentioned a lot of things, and so for the average layman, I'm going to put myself kind of on the lowest end of that spectrum, well below average. How do I kind of take this thing and kind of go into deployment? Do you guys have standard reference architectures? Do you have actual easy activation of this kind of? So if I look at this and say, great, I'm a customer that is going to be multi-cloud, kind of Azure is my primary cloud, and I'm going to have these other 2 environments as kind of failovers, maybe even on premise, for matter of fact. What is the thing that I do? Is there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think sometimes it can be a little bit deeper conversation. I think what we've done is, so I guess this is a plug here, but at megaport.com under our resources section, we have a docs portal, and we've outlined 9 scenarios, very specific scenarios of what most of our customers are looking for, right? And it also basically lines out step by step how they would build it across our platform. So we do have that reference architecture. I think all of these things that we're going through here today, it depends on the customer, and it's part of a little bit of a deeper conversation. But just in general, it's really, where do you want your traffic to go? And where do you want those routing decisions to take place? If you want, or you need all your traffic to come back into your network and you're not even routing cloud to cloud, which typically is not the case in my experience, then yeah, you're gonna have this type of setup. if you're setting up something that's multi-cloud and you want to route cloud to cloud, then most of our customers are going to go with placing an MCR in the middle. It just gives them a ton of flexibility. It gives them better performance, and it also alleviates some of the resources that they need in their data center as well.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks.
I bring this up just to kind of simplify it, right? Because we do work with a lot of customers that are maybe not what I would say born in the cloud, but they just want to connect two cloud environments together. So one of the things that this is kind of cool, it takes a little way for Megaport, but that Microsoft has done is they've partnered with Oracle, right? So I think one of the interesting things is we talk to the cloud providers, and I've been at this for about 4 years, involved in setting up cloud connectivity. And kind of when I came into the business, it was, I think as you worked across the cloud, and I don't know what your experience is, but it wasn't really, the cloud providers didn't really want to work together was my feeling. And that's me talking, right? But it didn't really feel like AWS and Azure wanted to talk about, being a multi-cloud type of shop. Well, I've kind of seen that shift. And to that, Oracle and Azure have actually set up a relationship where customers can connect, fast connects to ExpressRoutes, in a data center or at an edge location where they sit. It's not widely prevalent, across the globe, but there are locations where that can happen. I bring this up because in the Megaport example of that MCR, if customers do simply want to go cloud to cloud, we can do it across Azure, Oracle, AWS, IBM, Alibaba comes up quite a bit these days. So it is another option for a customer to set that up. I'm going to run past.
The multi-cloud conversation is a daily conversation for us, and it's not one. At first it was very awkward, and I think more and more it's just there is an acceptance, and you can see some of the cool tech that we're building, which actually helps customers. Like a bunch of announcements that we recently made at Ignite around kind of hybrid and how do we manage resources and manage services across both on-premise to cloud, but also then kind of in that multi-cloud space. So it's definitely not a taboo topic, and just meeting customers where they're at is absolutely essential. A lot of the work we do in the adoption framework is exactly around kind of that multi-cloud and making sure that customers are able to get those views across the environments in a holistic way.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. That's what ultimately, I guess, we're all here trying to build solutions that customers are looking for, right? And that is what they're looking for. Simplifying it just a little bit, just again, talking specifically about MCR connections. So, you can set them up in single and a pair. So we talked a little bit at the beginning about, having a strategy to set up a high availability or high availability type of architecture, a resilient architecture. And, most customers are going to go with a deployment that you see here on the right. But certainly, you don't have to have a data center that sits in the footprint. It can be just a cloud to cloud type of environment. And we've got multiple ways to set that up. Since this is a global operation that we're working with, I just want to touch on real quick. Any one of these designs, you can connect together from, if you want to set up one of the designs that we have, you want to set up in a specific region. If it's in Europe, that's great. But you can also utilize our network to connect these regions together, North America, Europe, APAC, whatever the case may be, right? So we are global. You can connect those data centers together. You can connect those cloud provider networks together across multiple regions. The other thing that's great about this, as I touched on with MVE, is you can utilize our network as your backbone for infrastructure across your SD-WAN platform and integrate that into your SD-WAN overlay and set up these routing hubs for multi-cloud and data center connectivity with us as well. Since this is dev radio, and I watched some of the great exchanges that you guys have had on the channel around some Python, Java, and the rest. I'm not a development expert. I'm not an expert in code or anything like that. But in a world of automation that we live in, I think it'd be crazy to say that Megaport's not involved in automating network infrastructure from a code perspective. So we do publish our code within a Terraform. So all of these examples that you showed today, you can run these Terraform scripts and automate deploying these services with Megaport. We also publish Open RESTful API. So this is really our ExpressRoute API readout here that I've just cut and paste here on the screen. But this is a dev channel. I'm sure many folks here are interested in setting up the automation. Any service that Megaport provides, it can be automated as well.
Yeah, this is huge, Mike. I mean, just from the fact that most of our customers today, when they wanted to look at standing up new environments, whether it be kind of new business units or standing up kind of extensions to specific landing zones and expanding their environment, they want to make sure that they have kind of that wholly owned, from building up the subscription to kind of automating the kind of stand up of the resource groups and the RBAC and kind of and the connectivity piece. Being able to plug that all together is super powerful, because then we can kind of one click deploy and it will stand you up.
Yeah, and it's all like, it really is, man. It's all about having that visibility too, and being able to pull everything into one environment, right? It's like kind of talking about that data, network sprawl at the beginning. It's just everything, security, just bringing it into that simple, easy to consume, easy to use platform.
Well, and the point to that is that you then drive repeatability, you drive consistency on how you're building out. You don't have kind of fat finger where somebody's breaking something along the way. But you can also, I mean, these things can then be deployed within minutes, as opposed to having to call in somebody who has to then go and actually click. So if you've done it once, you build it, you learn it, you kind of keep that as a template that you can then roll out in a repeatable way. And the more that we get, customers thinking about cloud in that model, you're able to then drive a whole bunch of really interesting kind of scenarios out to, citizen developers and people in the business who want to do something. They don't have to know how to create the network, like you create that network layer. They don't have to know how to go and provision a subscription. They're just this is what I'm looking for, align to the business process and the business rules, submit, gets approved, create. And, you've got this easy stream.
Yeah, 100%. And I have some fat fingers. So this has always been a good thing for me, moving into more of this automation world.
Cool.
Just a quick, if you want to have more around these resources, dev.megaport.com certainly can access more information. Real quick as we close, just want to show how easy it really is in our portal to deploy these resources. And again, you can set this up through automation. But this is the Megaport portal. It's portal.megaport.com. It's a customer-facing management portal. All of our services, customers can order, provision, activate, make changes, on demand, as I kind of just talked about earlier. We've got those base services. So if a customer wants to deploy a port in one of our enabled data centers, they're going to click on port, 100 gig, 10 gig, or 1 gig. That virtual router MCR, going to deploy that in a location that's optimal for them. We provide the license. MCR comes up literally in a matter of minutes. And then again, customers can integrate the virtual edge into their SD-WAN environment. What I've set up here before we get started was an MCR. I've set it up in Ashburn, Virginia. The actual physical appliance sits within an Equinix data center. It's a 1 gig virtual router. So the router itself is actually a CSR 1000V. So a Cisco virtual router. Again, we provide the license, also provide the easy to use interface here. I've already set up a connection to AWS. So through the automated process, we've actually established BGP with AWS. I also have an ExpressRoute connection into Azure. So real quick, just to show you what it would look like to set up an MCR, you're going to click on MCR. Maybe Ashburn, Virginia is of interest to you. You could select our Reston location. We also have the Equinix location that's about 5 miles away where I have my existing MCR. Click next. We have rate limits on the MCRs from 1 gig all the way up to 10 gigs. So let's just say you wanted to maybe transfer data from AWS into Azure. It's asymmetric, so you could have a data flow of 10 gigs in one direction. Ultimately, if you have 2 connections and you're splitting them right exactly the same, which is probably unlikely, but 5 gigs in each direction, right? So ultimately, it's the aggregate of what's being pushed through the MCR at any one time. But we have up to 10 gigs. You're going to name the connection. You can whatever you want. Service level just means this is more for billing. If you have a PO, it's just a reference. We supply ASN. You can't override this ASN and use a public ASN of your choosing. Click next. You get a quick summary, add MCR. there's a couple steps here to click and order the MCR. That's literally it. You now have a virtual router that will be live and active for you to deploy services here in a second. To save a little time, again, I just provisioned a connection here, and I have set up the AWS and Azure connection. Overall, to set up this connection between AWS and Azure, we've got those peers up and ready to route between the clouds. Took me probably about 10 minutes, I would say. But as we add additional connections, just to give you a feel and an idea of how you can add connections, and this would be with ports or MCRs or MVEs. Clearly, this is also supporting the routing, so it's a little bit different than a port. But anytime you add a connection to any one of those access services, you'll click Add Connection. You can connect to cloud. You could connect data center to data center. You could connect data center to MCR, as we went through in the slides. We also have a marketplace. There's roughly 300 service providers that sit in that marketplace. And then we have service keys that you can exchange between portals. But specific to our conversation and setting up multi-cloud connectivity, if I wanted to add another connection for Microsoft, I click on Microsoft. It's instantly going to ask for a service key. When you, well, it logged me out, but we should be in here in a second. When you create an ExpressRoute, and I've already have a couple that I've created, it gives you ultimately gives you a service key, right? So you're going to copy that service key and you'll bring it back into the Megaport Portal. So I've created this MDR Silicon Valley. So just as an example, this MCR sits in Ashburn. I've got a connection to Microsoft in Ashburn already on that MCR. I've now created a connection where we're going to connect to the Microsoft network in Silicon Valley. So this peering location is actually in San Jose. And we're going to build a connection from the MCR across the Megaport private backbone to this San Jose on-ramp. Simply going to copy the service key. So again, when you create the ExpressRoute, you get the service key. We'll bring it back here into the Megaport portal. It's going to validate the key. And what happens in part of the validation is it's going to give us the peer location. It'll give us the option for a primary and secondary connections. So when we reviewed ExpressRoute, we know with the ExpressRoute, we can do primary and secondary connections to Azure. For this one, we'll select the primary. If we repeated the process, we'd select the secondary and connect to the second ExpressRoute edge router. Simply going to name the connection. It's going to pull through the bandwidth that you selected. So I provision a 1 gig ExpressRoute. Certainly you could use sub 1 gig or whatever, ultimately you want to set up. I'll click next. So one of the great things about MCR, like we talk about not having to be a network engineer, is you literally have the option for it to be a fully automated process. So as I check out here and complete the process of turning up this connection into Microsoft, it'll be automated layer 2 connection from the MCR to the edge in Silicon Valley across the Megaport network. It's also going to, in conjunction with Azure, set up the BGP peering relationship. So I'll literally have a connection to Microsoft peering relationship set up at the edge in Silicon Valley here in about probably 5 minutes, probably at the most. To give you a quick look though, and this is our demo environment, so there's a lot going on in here. But to give you a quick look of what we've already set up and some of the unique things about the MCR is that you do have flexibility. You can set up route filters. So you can do BGP route filters if you want to block specific advertisements to full advertisements on the links. We also have specific prefix filters as well. We offer BFD on each one of the VXCs or the connections, which is a great thing for to be able to shut down that layer 2 connectivity. If kind of the layer 2 or layer 1 is lost, you're not blacking out hauling traffic by trying to reestablish the peer. So BFD meds also supported. To give you an idea of the looking glass, you can see all the routes, your route tables, and the routes are being advertised. So right now I'm just advertising routes actually from VPCs within AWS. So if I look at what's being advertised by BGP, I'm just receiving, I think these are 4 VPCs from my AWS environment that are being advertised back into the MCR. I also have that other connection into Azure that's shown here by the 12076, which is Azure's ASNs that's set up with every one of their connections. And this is the new connection that I'm adding in. So if we go back and just quickly look at the portal here or on the Azure console, we can see that the service is already provisioned. In a minute here, the peering relationship will also be added. And again, that takes probably like 5 minutes or so, but in the essence of time, I'll go to the one that I've already established, Microsoft Dev Radio Demo. This is our connection in Ashburn, Virginia. This is referred to as Washington, D.C. peer, but it is an Equinix location. So as part of the process, Megaport and Azure have set up this 169.254 network or subnet for the peering relationship. This peer, it's up, it's active. If we really quick just want to validate that the MCR is advertising the routes into Microsoft is now, we can click on the route table. And hopefully here in a second, we'll quickly see those subnets. Yeah, here we go. We can see that those VPCs are being added from AWS. So, this is the process to set up the connectivity for a multi-cloud type of environment. Again, we can connect this MCR back into the customer's data center as well. And as Wayne kind of alluded to earlier, and we talked about, if you want to build out specific architecture, you can go to docs.megaport.com and find the architecture that's right for you. And we can certainly, assist you in setting up services if you like. But it's really that easy. It's that simple. The power's in the customer's hands to deploy these services with Megaport. And I think that's all I had for the moment.
That's is that it? There's a lot there, but
yeah, man,
cool,
I'm
Mike.
sorry.
Cool.
I hope you guys. I hope that was a good rundown. I think that maybe was a little longer than what we had intended, but
hey,
yeah, but there wasn't anything I would remove. That's all useful stuff.
Yeah,
awesome.
It all looks really, really good. Really good. Thank you. I would just say, like, what do you want as a call to action? Where do you want people to go? Just to your docs site?
Yeah, I think so. Docs.megaport.com. And any service that you want to set up with Megaport, it gives a good description. It's also gives you step-by-step examples. Also within that Docs portal is the automation detail as well. If you want to go direct to our API automation, you go to dev.megaport.com, but all that can be accessed through Docs portal. Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's where I'd go. You can certainly reach out to myself directly or any one of our solution architects. So if you want to facilitate conversation, you can go to megaport.com and you can request to speak to a solution architect. And honestly, if I talk a bit, as you guys can see here, because I love talking about this stuff. So reach out, let's have some fun.
Fantastic. My camera may have frozen, but I think this is awesome. I hope you can
You're
still
back.
hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I can see it.
I think this is awesome. This is exactly the kind of stuff that our customers are looking for. Is like, how can we do this stuff in an easier way? Give us some reference architectures, give us the plans, and the fact that you got the Terraform plugins, the fact that you got the RESTful APIs. I think all goodness to kind of help drive some of that automation that our customers so desperately want to kind of implement.
Yeah, I do want to point out, because I feel like I have to, since we already went this far. We did get the peer is up. So on that new connection we just established, we now have a connection from Ashburn all the way into San Jose. There we lost the screen. So the peer is up. It's ready to go. That's literally the time that it takes, right? So you can do this all by code. You can go into the portal, but ultimately the control's in your hands.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, yeah, it was faster to do it than it was to explain it. That's always a good target. So.
Yeah, I get a little wordy. So
no, that was great.
Maybe not good
I
for
learned
radio.
a lot.
Appreciate it, guys. Wow, that's a great session.
Cool. Thanks for coming on. Thanks so much.
Take care.